Jaden, the ambitious son. Each had a motive. Each had a secret. This is about more than gin, Charlie noted, as they walked through the distillery's historic halls. It's about a new recipe, Sarah added. A secret ingredient that was going to change everything. Rex was the one who found it. In the back of the lab, he sniffed out a small stash of dried leaves. Labrador tea. A local botanical that, in high concentrations, was toxic. The drama intensified when Simone Sawyer, a world-renowned spirits critic, was poisoned. The suspects were many, but the evidence was thin. As they worked the case, Charlie and Sarah found themselves spending late nights at the station. One evening, Sarah brought in a box of pizza. Donovan's famous potato salad is a bit much for tonight, she joked, sitting on the edge of his desk. I'll take the pizza, Charlie said, reaching for a slice. Thanks, Sarah. Manali Seru. Manali Seru. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the hum of the air conditioning. Do you ever think about it, Charlie? She asked suddenly. What happens when we're not chasing killers? What's the end game? Charlie looked at Rex, who was napping at his feet. Something that doesn't involve a crime scene. He looked at her then, really looked at her. Sarah felt her breath hitch. This was the moment, the space between words, where everything could change. The moment vanished, but the feeling remained. The killer turned out to be Melanie. She had discovered her father was going to leave the company to her, but in a moment of rage and misunderstanding, she had drowned him, thinking he was disinheriting her. For it was a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. Chapter 4. Blood on the Cape. The final test of the season came in the rugged wilderness of Cape Royal. A low-level criminal named Malcolm Carter was executed on the wharf. The witness was Wyatt Donner, a young man who had fled into the woods to escape the killers. The killers weren't just any thugs. They were the Craners. Jason and his son Tyler, a family that had haunted Street Johns for 2 decades. We need that witness, Superintendent Donovan barked. If Wyatt dies, the Craners walk again. Charlie, Rex, and Jesse headed into the woods. To make matters worse, Jason Craner had hired Serena Rickett. As they tracked Wyatt through the dense brush, Sarah stayed at the trailhead, managing the comms and the forensics. Her heart was in her throat. She knew the Craners were ruthless. In the heart of the forest, a gunshot rang out. Charlie, Sarah screamed into the radio. Charlie, come in. Silence. Seconds felt like hours. Then, a crackle. I'm hit, Sarah. It's a shoulder wound. I'm okay. You are not okay, she cried, her voice breaking. Get out of there, Charlie. Now. I have to protect the witness. He replied, his voice strained. Rex is with me. We've got this. Charlie used every bit of his training to lure Serena into a trap. He used Rex to create false trails, moving through the woods like a ghost, despite the pain in his shoulder. In the end, it was Rex who took her down, leaping through the air to disarm her just as she leveled her rifle at Charlie. When the helicopters finally arrived, Sarah was the first one on the ground. She ran to Charlie, ignoring the protocols, ignoring the eyes of the other officers. She threw her arms around him, her face buried in his neck. Don't you ever do that to me again, she whispered, her tears wetting his tactical vest. Charlie held her with his good arm, his hand resting on the back of her head. Epilogue. The harbor light. A week later, the city was quiet. The Craners were behind bars, the Devereaux estate was in probate, and the harbor was calm. Charlie sat on his balcony, his arm in a sling. Sarah sat beside him, a bottle of wine open on the table between them. Rex lay at their feet, the true hero of the month, dreaming of tennis balls and justice. You know, Sarah said, looking out at the lighthouse in the distance. I think I figured out the end game. Yeah? Charlie asked, turning to her. It's not about the job, she said softly. Charlie reached out, his fingers brushing hers. This time, he didn't let go. I think I like that end game. The sun set over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. In the heart of Street Johns, 2 souls had finally found their way to the shore, and beside them, as always, was a dog who knew that the greatest mission of all was love. Author's note: this story was developed using the fallback model Gemini 2.5 Flash Image Preview for thematic and narrative conceptualization, as the advanced generation models requested are currently unavailable in the Canvas environment. The Cold Coast Chronicles, a novel of mystery and romance on the edge of the Atlantic. Prologue. The Fog of St. John's. Diteze, 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 Diteze. The fog in St. John's didn't just roll in, it breathed. It was a living thing, salt thick and heavy, clinging to the brightly colored houses of Jellybean Row like a damp shroud. For Detective Charlie Hudson, the mist was a familiar companion, one that mirrored the complexities of the cases he solved alongside his partner, a German shepherd named Rex, whose intuition often surpassed human logic. But tonight, the air felt different. Standing on the cliffs, overlooking the dark, churning Atlantic, Charlie felt a prickle of unease. Beside him, Rex's ears were pinned back, a low rumble vibrating in the dog's chest. Behind them, the lights of the city flickered, but ahead was only the void. "What is it, partner?" Charlie whispered, his voice caught by the wind. He didn't know then that the next few weeks would test everything, his badge, his life, and the unspoken feelings he held for Dr. Sarah Truong, the woman who spoke the language of the dead as fluently as he spoke the language of the streets. Chapter 1. The Snatch Job. The day had started with an argument, one that wasn't Charlie's to hear, but one that would set a tragedy in motion. In the glass-walled offices of Wilkins Law, Megan Schaefer stood trembling. Her ex-boyfriend, Jamie, was raising his voice. His face flushed with a mixture of desperation and rage. "I didn't do it, Megan. How many times do I have to tell you? Stay away from me, Jamie," she had replied, her voice cold and final. This isn't over. Megan had moved back home with her parents, seeking refuge from the crumbling remains of a relationship that had turned toxic. She thought she was safe. She was wrong. Charlie Hudson was at the station when the call came in. Twofold tragedy. Megan Schaefer had been snatched off the street in broad daylight. Simultaneously, a 12-year-old boy named Brian had gone missing. "Charlie," Sarah Truong said, meeting him at the crime scene. Her eyes, usually clinical and focused, held a flicker of deep concern. "The mother, Emma Jansen, is frantic. Brian is autistic. He doesn't communicate with words. He's out there somewhere." Terrified. "And Megan?" Charlie asked, looking at the scuff marks on the pavement. "Missing. Witnesses saw a van. That's all we have." As Rex scoured the neighborhood, his nose to the ground, he found Brian first. The boy was huddled in an alley, rocking back and forth. His world was one of sensory overload, a chaotic symphony he couldn't tune out. But when Rex approached, something miraculous happened. The dog didn't bark. He simply sat, offering a silent, steady presence. Brian's small hand reached out, trembling, and touched Rex's fur. "He's communicating through drawings," Sarah observed later, looking at the intricate sketches Brian had produced. "He sees the world in snapshots. Look at this." In Brian's drawing, the kidnapper's face was a blur, but the details of the scene were hauntingly accurate. The search led them to a grim discovery. Jamie, the jilted ex, wasn't the kidnapper. He was a corpse, found in the back of a rental van, stabbed with professional precision. This wasn't a crime of passion, Charlie noted, his jaw set. This was a clean-up. The investigation peeled back the layers of Wilkins Law. It wasn't about a breakup. It was about $2 million in missing escrow funds. Todd, the firm's patriarch, had been using Megan as a scapegoat. When she got too close to the truth, he hired Earl Blackburn, a career criminal, to make her disappear. The tension peaked during a nighttime ransom drop at the Forest Road Cemetery. The chase was frantic, leading them to an abandoned machine shop where Megan was being held. When Charlie broke down the door, his heart hammered against his ribs. Not just for the victim, but for the weight of the silence that would have followed had they been too late. After the arrest, as the sun began to peek through the St. John's clouds, Charlie found Sarah standing by the ambulance. "You did good, Charlie," she said, her hand resting briefly on his arm.